So recently, I decided to go back to Battlefield 4, which I played so much of back in the day on PS4. Back in 2013, 2014, I played this shit so much. I think out of all the games I've had on the PS4, I put more hours into Battlefield 4 than any other game I had on that console. It was just amazing game. So I decided to come back to the game, but this time try it out on PC because I heard that Battlefield is just so much better on PC. And now that I actually have a pretty good gaming rig, I decided to check out the PC version of BF4. And yeah, it's even better on PC than it was on console. Like, I feel like the keyboard and mouse is so natural for Battlefield compared to the controller, where it works, but it works better with a keyboard and mouse, definitely. It didn't feel too different because on the PS4 version, you did have support for 64 players, you did have custom servers, you did have a lot of those things that you had on the PC version. It's just the PC version runs better, of course. I ran at a really high refresh rate, and my resolution was much higher, and it looked better on the PC, obviously. But either way, Battlefield 4 was an amazing game, and coming back to it was so much fun. I have so many great memories with this game. This is at a time when I was really falling out of love with the Call of Duty series. I consider myself a huge fan of COD. I loved the Modern Warfare games, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2. Then Ghost came out, and I didn't think the game was bad, but I mean, the maps were awful. That was the big thing that killed the game for me. The base maps were they were atrocious, and it just was missing a lot from Black Ops 2 and older Call of Duty games that I felt really underwhelmed by Ghost, and I know a lot of people in the Call of Duty community felt the exact same way that I did with that. But on PS4, I got the PS4 pretty early. I got it in late 2013, probably around Christmas time, I think. And I remember there just weren't a lot of games to play. I still spent most of my time on PS3, even though I had a brand new PS4. And there really weren't a lot of games, especially shooting games, to play. So you had Call of Duty Ghosts, there was Killzone Shadowfall, which was their big exclusive game on the PS4. I didn't really care much for that game either. It just didn't do much for me. And there was the free-to-play game, Blacklight Retribution. That game was okay, and I played a little bit of it, but that wasn't going to last me a full year leading into the next Call of Duty. That just wasn't going to happen. So then I decided to pick up Battlefield 4, because I considered myself a Battlefield fan at that point. Battlefield Bad Company 2 was one of my favorite FPS games of all time. I remember I had so much fun with that game on the PS3. And with Battlefield 3, I thought that game was also pretty good, so I decided to give BF4 a try, and when I did try it out, most of the issues were fixed, thankfully, because, first impressions are very important. If that was my first impression of the game, back when it was in its unplayable state, I probably would have never touched it again. So good thing I decided to get it when all those issues were fixed, because, as you guys know, Battlefield 4 has one of the worst launches in online gaming history. It was just ridiculous how terrible that game was from what I've seen, but thankfully I didn't experience it myself. But going back to this game really was something special 7 years later. I mean, I played this game for 2 years at least. I mean, I didn't like Advanced Warfare that much either, so I played BF4 for another year, and Hardline came out, which was okay, but BF4 was obviously the better game. And, I just haven't had the same feeling about Battlefield since BF4. I mean, we had Battlefield 1, which I thought was a good game, but not as good as Battlefield 4. And then Battlefield 5, I decided to skip because I just heard so many awful things about it. And it turned out that, when I finally got around to playing it, that people were definitely right about that game. It's probably one of the worst Battlefield games ever made. It's just so underwhelming. That was the big problem with BF5. It just felt so lacking in content compared to previous Battlefields. But Battlefield 4 is just the epitome of the Battlefield experience and what it's supposed to be. It's just this giant sandbox where you could do so many different things. I mean, you have so many different vehicles, so many different weapons, and I feel like a big reason why people weren't that impressed with Battlefield 1 was that, obviously, with the World War I setting, they had to take some of that away. You couldn't have jets, you couldn't have as much weapon variety in the game as you could with modern military shooter like Battlefield 4. So it was lacking in that regard, although I did have a good deal of fun with BF1. Battlefield 4, in my opinion, was just on a completely different level. and it was just, it was probably one of the best FPS games I ever played. Going back to it, I just had so much fun. It's amazing. I wasn't really much of a TDM player. I wanted to try out TDM specifically because I always had the thought in my head that the reason why Modern Warfare 2019 is a bad game is because of its focus on realism, which tends to slow down the gameplay a lot, you know, especially compared to previous CODs. You guys know that I'm not a big fan of Modern Warfare 2019. I think it's a terrible game. Definitely the worst Call of Duty ever made. But I always assumed that it, like, a big part of it was also the realistic gameplay, at least realistic compared to previous CODs. But then I played Battlefield 4, which also has a bit of an emphasis on realism, although it's obviously not all realistic. There's some crazy shit you could do, a lot of action sequences that you can do in BF4 that obviously wouldn't take place in a real Battlefield, like jumping off a jet and fucking sniping people in the air and stuff, like, you know what I mean? Only in Battlefield moments aren't really things that happen in real battlefields, of course. So when I say the word realism, of course, I'm using that term loosely, but you guys understand what I'm saying. There is a bit of more of a focus, especially when it comes to weapon sounds, weapon animations, the kick that certain weapons have over others, although weapons in Modern Warfare and Battlefield are definitely a lot easier to handle than, let's say, picking up a game like Squad or Insurgency, which really focus on realism and tactical gameplay. But Modern Warfare is definitely more tactical than any Call of Duty we've had before, and Battlefield is definitely more tactical than Call of Duty traditionally has been. So I thought the realism that we had in Modern Warfare was part of the reason why I didn't like the game so much, because it slowed down the gameplay a lot. But then I played TDM in Battlefield 4, and I just realized it has nothing to do with realism. It's nothing to do with that. It's just Modern Warfare is a terrible game. Even the maps are so much better in Battlefield 4. And Team Deathmatch in Battlefield, I mean, that's not what Battlefield is known for. But they still did it a lot better in this game than they did with Modern Warfare, which is just insane. I have no complaints about almost any of the maps that I played with TDM. Flood Zone, I remember I hated that map in Conquest. But with Team Deathmatch, that map was awesome. And just like every map I played, every single map I played, I have almost no complaints about, which with Modern Warfare is the exact opposite. I think almost all the maps in that game are atrocious. Piccadilly, Euphrates Bridge, St. Petrograd, I can go on and on about all the awful maps in Modern Warfare. It would be easier to make a list of maps in the game that aren't bad, and I can't come up with maybe there's like one or two maps that are actually good out of like all the maps that we've had in that game, which is just not good. But well, Battlefield 4 Team Deathmatch, which I don't really play much of back in its prime, but I wanted to do a little experiment to see how it would play against Modern Warfare, and I just had so much more fun with TDM and Battlefield 4 than I did with Modern Warfare 2019. It's just amazing how that worked out, right? But yeah, Conquest has always been the bread and butter of the Battlefield series, and Conquest in this game was just amazing. Rush, I wasn't really much of a Rush player. For some reason, I didn't vibe with that game mode too much, but I know a lot of people loved it. But the thing that amazed me the most about coming back to Battlefield 4 is that it doesn't feel like a game that came out 7 years ago. It feels like a brand new 2020 game. It's just amazing how Battlefield games, they age tremendously. Like, there's really no other FPS game that ages as well as Battlefield. Because you can easily put this game up against Modern Warfare, against any of the new FPS games that have been out lately. This game still holds up. Battlefield 4 still holds up. And that's what's so awesome about coming back and playing this game, is that it doesn't feel like you're playing an old game, even though it came out in 2013. In 2013, I was a sophomore in high school. Now I'm out of college. It feels like a lifetime ago, but not when you're playing Battlefield 4. It feels like 2013 was last week. It's just amazing. And I didn't realize how much I missed Battlefield 4 until I went back and played it, because now I can't stop playing. And I'm probably going to play more BF4 on this channel going forward, because it's just so fucking awesome. I love this game so much, because there's just so much shit to do. You can play a casual match of TDM, you can do a large conquest mode, which is probably the best aspect of Battlefield. But I remember back in the day, yeah, I played this game for years. I played this game for at least 3 years on a consistent basis, but I never bothered learning how to fly a jet. I never bothered really learning how to ride the vehicle, so that's something new that I'm going to try and figure out and try to do, because that sounds like a really rewarding experience, and I definitely want to do that. Like, there's just so much shit you can do in this game that it's unlike any other FPS game I've ever played. Battlefield 4 just stands out above most of the rest. And at a time, the beginning of the current generation, early PS4 days, when there really weren't too many games to play, Battlefield 4 was there, and we've gone through the entire generation at this point, and Battlefield 4 still is one of the best games we've had this entire generation. But anyway, that's all I got for today. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.